Good evening, good morning. Welcome to Penn State Lessons, Padm 401, Lessons 9 and 10. I just want to start off with a couple of announcements. Paper number 2, most of you have got this, but I want to just emphasize the due date has been moved. It is not due on Sunday, the 10th. It's due the 24th, so you have an extra 2 weeks to knock it out. I think that's fair considering I might have been a little bit delayed getting the paper back to you due to login issues. So I want to make sure everyone has that extra time. They can digest the lessons. And I'd ask that if you have questions on paper 1, my comments and how I gave you your grades, please let me know so I can incorporate that, or you can incorporate that for paper 2. Second announcement, mid-course survey. It's out. Please fill it out. That's the only way I know how to improve the lessons and the material for the course going forward. And there's a very good chance you might have me again. So, tell me what needs improvement or what's good about this course so I can incorporate it for next time. And then Job Talk, there was a lot of interest on the Job Talk. So I will be having it probably the last week in July or the first week in August. So it'll be after the paper's due, so you might have a little bit more time on your hands. What I'll do is if there's questions, please shoot them to me beforehand. Questions about jobs, questions about internships, working in the Intel community, those types of questions. Shoot them to me before, because I'm sure if one person has that question, probably 10 of you have that same question. So I can bring those into the Job Talk. And what we'll probably do is, I have Adobe Connect, so we'll do it live. I'll sit in and give my little spiel and then open it up to questions. So we'll go ahead and do that the last week in July, first week in August. Current events. So I'm speaking. Well, first let me say happy July 4th to you and all your families. I hope you got a little bit of rest today. And I am taping this on July 4th. And obviously what's in the news, Turkey. I don't think we covered that last week. Bangladesh. Those were the two big ISIS terrorist attacks. Baghdad, which unfortunately I just heard today, the death toll is up to 200, which would make this the deadliest attack period in Baghdad, including all the attacks in 2005, 2006, 2007, which in one case I think it's sad that the situation is like that, but in another case I think almost the American people are inured to explosions happening in Baghdad based on what's been going on for the last few years. But the question I want you to leave you with is, well, one, it's ironic. A month ago, we were talking about TSA lines being too long, and now no one's talking about that after what's happened in Turkey. No one's talking about too little security at airports. But the other thing is, again, the news media likes to think that ISIS is on the march because they have attacks in Turkey, in France, in Belgium, and Orlando. But is that a sign of strength? Does that mean because they can attack a soft target with suicide bombs and machine guns, does that really mean ISIS is on the march? Or does it incentivize ISIS? All they have to do is conduct an attack, and now the news media says that they're on their march, or they're strengthening, or they're showing global reach. Does that, the publicity side, incentivize this type of terrorism from occurring? And I should just give you my opinion. I think ISIS is on a declining cycle now, despite the attacks overseas. Their social media is in decline, their revenue sources are in decline, the land that they can control in Syria and Iraq is on decline. This global caliphate is kind of falling apart. But the affiliates can still conduct attacks and still call it ISIS, or they can be supported with minimal support from ISIS core. And again, they want to give that impression that they're on the march, or they're aggressive and they're worldwide. And they can do it by attacking soft targets, which I've said is not very hard to do. So food for thought. Just think about that as we move forward. So just lesson 9, basically risk and resiliency. Thura, the threat hazards guide is one of your assignments for this lesson. When you're going through it, just the issue it originates comes from Homeland Security resource allocations going to certain areas. And for those of you might have been familiar with this, is South Dakota per capita gets 5 times the resources that New York City does, or Washington, or Los Angeles. And you can imagine that South Dakota has a lower population and far, far less terrorism threat there than you would have in New York. And this resulted in some ridiculous levels of requests. For instance, in South Dakota, the police have communication systems and counter WMD that's far superior than they see in New York or New York or LA. Their dogs have vests, which tells you how much money they have to burn in South Dakota and North Dakota. So the risks were adjusted to account for population. The problem is, or to match funding to population. Problem with that is sometimes your risks are in unpopulated areas. The southern border, for example, requires a lot of Homeland Security resources, but there's not a lot of population there. Some critical infrastructure like dams and power, these are located in non-populous areas, but they get shortchanged because, again, the risk metrics were such that it covered population areas. So they started to, again, readjust the risk assessments, and that's what you have now. And I just want to give you a preview of where that came from. And then resiliency, that could probably be summed up lesson 9. How do you bounce back? Really, not lessons 9 and 10. How do you bounce back after a natural disaster? How do you restore power? How do you there's only so much you can do for the people that die, for the people that are directly impacted on day 1. So now how do we make sure that day 2, day 3, day 4, we not only have the infrastructure, we've taken care of disaster, but the population can go about their day-to-day, whatever their lives were beforehand. And that's what kind of lesson 9 focuses on. Lesson 10 is just recovery support functions. Again, this goes along with the resiliency, and I'm not going to read. Those are the recovery support functions you see below. There's in your lessons, each one is outlined in pretty thorough detail. I'd go through all of them, but then for your discussion, you're going to choose one and focus on how DHS can accomplish this in a real-world scenario. So those are lessons 9 and 10. If there's questions or issues, please let me know, and I look forward to reading your discussions.